Hello. Hello to all you wonderful people out there. I have no idea whether I'm actually live or not because I always have lag. I really wanted to jump in and I wanted to talk about something that's so important because it's something that's been coming up inside a private membership that I run. Hi Joanna. Hi Amy. Hi Amber. You know, there's a lot of talk always. Good morning, Patsy. Around the regret that we feel as parents when we learn that our children are either autistic or ADHD or PDA, in how we parented them previously. Hi Louisa. Hi Jenny. I think it's really difficult to escape that feeling of guilt and regret. I know that with one of my children, I knew from the time that they were an infant that they were autistic. But then with my other girls, I didn't know that they were autistic because this was our normal. I didn't know I was autistic because this was our normal. I just thought, you know, it's normal. That's not autism. Everybody's like that, says almost every undiagnosed, unidentified autistic person ever. But I think it's painful when we come to the realization that actually we've been parenting a certain way. And if you're anything like me, my eldest in particular copped a really hard time from me. A really hard time. Because I didn't know we were a neurodivergent family. I didn't understand what that even meant. And even when I did know that we were a neurodivergent family, I still didn't know what that meant for a really long time, and I'm still working it out now. But I made so many mistakes, and I think, neurodivergent or not, when you're parenting, hi Penny and Pippa and Jody and Katie and Lisa and Falguni, am I pronouncing that correctly? Hi Brian. When you're parenting, I mean, hi Joy, we're doing the best that we can all the time with what we know and what resources we have and our family history, what we've learnt, our environment. We're doing the best we can. We really, really are, even when we think we're not. So I felt, hi Elaine, I felt a lot of guilt in knowing that for 16 years I parented in a particular way that was societal pressure. It had a lot of conditioning attached to it. And my story was that I just thought my children were people that experienced anxiety and, hi Danielle, struggled with certain things in life because I was a terrible parent and I was failing and I wasn't doing them right. I wasn't doing by them right. So I see this happen with so many parents. We blame ourselves. Hi Lee. We think that there's something that we're doing wrong, or that there could be so much more that we could be doing to help our children. And even, I think it's dangerous when we put other people up on pedestals and think that they have it all together, think that they've worked it out and that they know what they're doing because they're in the public eye, because they've written books about parenting, because they speak about parenting. None of us have it all figured out. We don't. Honestly, I still sit with, you know, my children who feed back to me all the time how I've hurt them or mistakes I've made. And I used to take it really personally, but I try and sit with the information now, and I sit with the discomfort because I learn. And if there's anything that helped me understand my own parents, it was becoming a parent myself. Pippa says, I made my daughter feel that she was easier than my other children who had a diagnosis, only to get to her diagnosis at 15. The result is now she feels like a burden. Yeah, it's hard, Pippa, isn't it? It's hard to avoid this stuff. We come into parenting, hi Yael, as human beings. We're not experts. Even the experts aren't really experts. They're just reading information out of books and filling out tests and getting degrees. I'm one of them. Do I yell at my children? Yeah, of course I do. Do I lose my patience with my children, even though they experience disability, even though they're autistic? Do I lose my patience and feel frustrated with them? Yes. I am a human being. We are all human beings. We are never going to be perfect. There's no such thing. And I remember thinking, when I had a different mindset and I was still kind of trapped in that medical model of autism, I remember thinking all the time, God, there's so much more I should be doing. I should be doing this. I should be looking more into this. And there's so many therapies out there that I haven't learned about yet, and I should be researching more and more and more. And I already was. I was up all night. I was up earlier than everyone else. I was sleep deprived. I was reading every book known to human beings that was coming out about autism. I was YouTubing awful, awful narratives, awful things on current affair programs. Just dying inside. So I was invested in all of this information. I couldn't get enough information. Give me all the information about autism. And the reality is, there is so much information out in the world about autism and our children, and there are so many therapies, so many approaches, and so many parenting approaches and views and perspectives and schools of thought and belief. One lifetime as me would never be enough to get through 1/1,000,000th of what's out there. It's just not feasible. It's not realistic. I'm never going to know everything. I'm never going to know, half of it's not realistic. And the saddest thing about this is that whilst my 10-year-old daughter was in her most beautiful little chubby baby years, I was so fixated on her being autistic and me having to do something about that those years are gone now, and I will not get them back. And I see all the time that as families, sometimes we're even encouraged by our support people and our professionals to project into the future of who our children will become, and we completely miss who they are now. We forget about the moment, we forget about the now, and just being with them. The other thing on top of that is that as parents, we don't get a get out of jail free card from guilt and regret and remorse. I could throw out millions of examples across my day where I think I've failed my children. And I used to give myself such a hard time about this. But what's really sad about this is that we're still robbing our children of that safety and that security and that trust that they need. When we get so caught up in feeling bad, we cultivate this energy and we shift ourselves away from our center and their center, and we cannot connect with our children in love and peace. And in that moment when we are wrapped up in those thoughts of failure, when we are spending all of our time thinking about all the things we're not doing, all the things we're doing wrong, all the things that we regret and we didn't do right. Nobody comes into this knowing what to do. Nobody comes into being a part of a neurodivergent family without making mistakes. Nobody. I don't feel as likable as Minecraft. Being autistic myself, I don't know how to be with them. Yeah. And you know what, Pippa? I think that's okay. I'm not as likable as Minecraft. I'm not as likable as most of the video games in our house. But I tell you what, I am the one consistent. I will always be there. My child is going to come to me when they need love, when they need security, when they've hurt themselves, when they're sad. They'll come to me. And it hasn't always been that way. I've not always been a safe parent. I've been the parent who had the inadvertent energy of demand and pressure. You know, giving off that energy of desperation. That if I could just get them to do this, if I could just get them to go to school, or if I could just get them to eat more vegetables, or if I could just get them to wear a different outfit. And the pain associated with living like that, and then not knowing where to begin to change that, not knowing what people meant when they said, just let that go. Because as a neurodivergent person and as a PDA myself, I was caught up in control. But that was fed by a society that values conformity. We do a lot of talking about valuing individuality and uniqueness, but we don't put a lot of action in. How did I stop doing that? I haven't completely stopped doing that because I'm a human being. So there are many moments across the day where my children will annoy me and I will annoy them. Where one of my girls might speak to me in what society would deem as disrespectful. And there's the initial response that comes up for me inside is, how dare you? That's absolutely disrespectful. But I've practiced and I continue to practice sitting with that discomfort, taking a moment and just being still or quiet. Because if there's anything I learnt about emotions for me, is that when I react rather than respond, I only make it harder for me. My children are damaged in that process by the way I react, because I will say things that I wish I hadn't said, and I'll do things I wish I hadn't done. But I only make it more difficult for me because I know that in the future, these are things I will struggle to forgive myself for. And I have to consciously, continuously practice self-forgiveness, because when I'm caught up in self-loathing or giving myself a hard time about what I didn't do for my children or what I should be doing, I rob them of the parent they deserve. I rob myself of the happiness and the life and the connection with my children that I crave, but I continue to steal from myself. It's not easy, you know. I know it's not easy. I know what my family home was like when I was a teenager, a PDA teenager, who couldn't go to school anymore because I'd been put into isolation and I'd been on conduct cards and behavioural modification programs and all of that. And that stuff is traumatic for the entire family. The entire family. But it's like, you know, when people talk, as parents, sometimes we say this thing where we make a passing comment and say, if anybody ever hurt my children, I wouldn't mind going to jail for it, for, you know, getting justice. But then we'd be robbing our children and making them suffer twice. And this is what we do when we self-loathe as parents. We feel guilt and remorse because we've made mistakes, we think we've made mistakes, or we haven't done the thing that we think we should have done. And then we get so caught up in that process that we're unreachable. We can't form that connection, and our children are still struggling. Jessica says, when you hold on to guilt, you're still hurting your kids because they feel that self-hate even if they don't understand it. Exactly. It's an energy. And as autistic people, we are really sensitive to energy. The first mode of communication, our native tongue, is energy. Before a person says anything, we know what's going on with them. We can feel it. We feel stress, we feel anger that comes from other people, we feel sadness, grief, excitement, happiness, joy. We feel it all. So when we are stuck in that process of giving ourselves a hard time, that's what we're throwing out there, and it doesn't feel safe and it doesn't feel secure. Now, this is not about me shaming and blaming. This is about me saying all the more reason to forgive ourselves, all the more reason to look after ourselves. Because I know a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, self-care has been commercialised and it's unrealistic. The thing about, I mean, I agree, it's definitely been commercialised, but the thing about essential care of ourselves is that we are the anchor for our children. And when we're not okay, it's like their access to trust and safety and connection and love is compromised. So this is why it's so important for us to look after ourselves. How have you undone the damage to your children? Did you apologise or let it go or have a chat? I think the mistakes that I made will never be undone, and they will always have a lasting effect on my children. And we have an ongoing, open and honest conversation that never closes. It doesn't always go well, but I practice holding space. And so sometimes, you know, my eldest will bring things up with me and we'll have a chat about it, why I did something I did or how I could have done it differently. And there are times where I invite the conversation. Remember that time when this happened and, you know, you were really upset with me, or we didn't talk for weeks. What would you have preferred I do in that situation? Or what could I have done differently? And it's not so much about, you know, keeping ourselves suspended in that narrative of I did the wrong thing, I owe my family forever. It's not about that. It's about allowing our children to see the power in change, the power and the healing that comes from witnessing us wanting to do better as their parents. But at the same time, I cannot say this enough. We are doing the best we can given what we know. The autistic community, the adult autistic community, we often have a lot to say. And sometimes we say it aggressively, sometimes we say it with love and we're able to hold space. There's a lot of trauma inside of our community because we are the adults who were once children when nobody knew what the hell to do, when nobody knew what we know now about autism, when nobody knew they were autistic, when we were pressured to be compliant and things were much harder. So this is why we're so passionate about preventing our neurokin from going through the same things that we did. And sometimes the families of neurodivergent children will often receive the information we put out there as offensive or insulting, or feel like we're trying to tell you how to parent. And it's not about that. It's about us saying, as children, this is what we went through, and this is the impact it had on us. And we want to give you this information because we care about your children. We care about you. We care about the coming generations of neurodivergent people. We want to see less trauma. And it's hard to do that because we're up against a medical model of disorder. We're up against a medical model that tells people that their children need to be fixed or changed, that they must go to school, that they must wear this uniform, that encourages us again to be projected into a future that nobody can predict. Because if we look at the most common questions and the fears that we have as parents, most of what I hear back is, well, if my child cannot do this now, how will they function in the real world? This is the real world. This is the real world now. And the word function is an elusive thing to pin down, honestly. Penny says, I'm the oldest of 4 kids. Penny is an autistic adult. Understandably, my mum sometimes lost her temper and would raise her voice and yell. Problem was, I interpreted her tone of voice as how I'd be feeling if I was speaking that way. Result was that we'd often bicker. Me too, Penny. I learnt that if I needed to talk to her about something important, to get it out in writing, because then she could read it all. Because if we spoke, she'd be reacting to what I'd already said. Whoops. When I still had more to say. This is a really great comment, Penny, because I often encourage families to have, we used to have for one of our girls a tissue box that we prettied up together, put it outside her room, and when she wanted to tell me something, she would write it on a piece of paper and pop it in the tissue box, and I'd collect it at the end of every day before bed. So then I had time to process. She was able to communicate in a non-confrontational way. We could both sleep on it and then come back later. Sometimes it's helpful to go for a walk, so it's not so confronting. We're not face to face. Is it possible to provide a trauma-free childhood? It's as though it's an impossible race to win with society, school. That is such a good question, isn't it? I don't know. I don't know the answer. I mean, when we're neurodivergent, I think we would be hard-pressed to find neurodivergent people that didn't have some form of trauma, because society is not set up for us, and we have to learn things the really hard way. Many of us parents suffer guilt, but we do our best with what we know and have at a given time. Absolutely, Patsy, absolutely. We have an open dialogue system in our house, but my eldest finds this confronting. Yeah, she writes me letters about her feeling so that I take it all in properly before responding. That's fantastic. Yeah, and all of our children will often be different. This is the thing about autism. The importance of moving away from this generic default framework that's associated with being autistic. We're all different. Anyway, I wanted to pop in and I wanted to talk about this because I am really passionate about people tuning into what is right for them and what works for them. And I almost cringe when I see people looking elsewhere to learn how to connect with their children. And I know there's lots of reasons for that. But everything we need is already within. It's just that tricky thing called life, and that tricky thing about diversity and divergence can make things a little bit trickier to learn, to find our way. But it hurts my heart to think that families are out there just, living our lives feeling guilty. I had my 10-year-old non-speaking child in ABA therapy at 13 months of age. And that's something that I will live with for the rest of my life. There are things that we do that we thought were good and right at the time. And I didn't know. I trained as an ABA therapist because I didn't know. I didn't know better. And when I did, I changed. And that's what we do. When we know better, we do better. But it's about trusting our gut. On the function in the real world thing, I successfully was unit coordinator for 2 huge units, 776 students and 300 students, in semester 2 last year, while Melbourne was in stage 4 restrictions. In the background though, I wasn't leaving the house due to mandatory masks even for walking outside, and my mum was doing my grocery shopping for me, so I was only able to do my work with her outside help. This is why functioning labels are so dangerous and damaging. Because when we show up in the world, people see our skill sets as autistic people. They see our strengths. And when we are labelled as mildly autistic or high-functioning autistic, our support needs are grossly underestimated or dismissed. When we are labelled severely autistic, I mean, that just sounds so ridiculous to me. Severely autistic or low-functioning autistic, our intelligence is often assumed to be congruent with the way that we move our bodies, or the fact that we communicate in different ways, in other ways than speaking. Yeah. It's so ableist. We're not... Everything about neurodivergence is in comparison to holistic people or non-neurodivergent people. That's not how it should be. We are our own identity and culture. We are neurodivergent people. So we're on our own timeline of development. We are not non-autistic people with a side of autism that we can treat or get rid of. We are always going to be autistic. Always. And we need to be supported to be actualized, not normalized. This is where the pain comes in for families. When we are encouraged to believe that our children will one day be on par with their peers, The pain comes from never getting there. But we're not supposed to. Hi, Kylie. I was thinking this today at my ophthalmology appointment. I had to wait outside with the heavy traffic zooming past. And from the outside, I know I looked okay. But on the inside, I wanted to run away and thought I was going to faint. Yeah, isn't that incredible? See, this is what I'm talking about. People don't see the invisible disability. They don't see the struggles inside. Thank you for sharing that. Except if it is seen as not a disability, then we don't get the help. It's a dichotomy. Yeah. So I think when we think about the neurodiversity paradigm, we say autism is not a disorder, but it's definitely a disability. Definitely a disability. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just going off on all different tangents here. I just wanted to pop in and say hi and send some love out there and tell you that you're all doing amazing. You are. We never think we are. We never think we're good enough. We never think that we are adequate when it comes to raising human beings. I mean, think about that for a second. We are raising human beings. It is not an easy task. Oh, Tanya, that's wonderful. Congratulations to her. Okay, I better go and do some parenting of my children. Lovely to be here with you all. Have a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, whatever it is for you. And thank you for connecting. Bye-bye.